Hi, my name is Phyllis and I'm the Executive Director of Hong Kong Unison. Hong Kong Unison is a local organization that fights for equal and equitable education for ethnic minority children in Hong Kong. We are, as I said, an advocacy group, not really a service group, but we're really concerned about education of ethnic minority children in Hong Kong. So I have been to schools previously called designated schools, because these schools take in more ethnic minority children or non-ethnic Chinese children. Some schools can be up to 90%. And actually, a lot of local Chinese people in Hong Kong do not know that such schools existed. Because when they grew up, most of the non-Chinese students would be placed in these so-called designated schools. And if I want to quote a number, 60% of these children, of these non-ethnic Chinese children, are in about, I would say, in 10 schools that has more than 90% ethnic minority children. And then I've also been to schools and meet students from, with not a 90%, maybe a few of them. So and I see a big difference between the two schools. I feel it's the communications with the students. Teachers need to have good communications with students. Communication, not just being that they receive instructions and the instructions, I won't say orders, but instructions well from the teachers. But actually, an interactive classroom is very much needed. And I feel teachers need to take time to understand their students' needs, their backgrounds, and try and motivate them and let them have a chance to speak in class. Because imagine, I think a normal human being time span, concentration span, is about an hour. And you're asking a student to sit through 3 hours of morning school until lunchtime. That's quite a bit. I would say for teachers going to mainstream schools and teaching ethnic minority children, they should be more. They should pay more attention to them, because especially in a school that uses Chinese as a medium of instruction, because most of the students with an ethnic minority background, they may not be very fluent in Chinese, and depending on the stage. If they come in at primary one and they did not have a kindergarten education in Chinese, then it would be a huge gap. So they need to pay more attention to these children and give them more care and to cater to their needs. Maybe it would be a different way of teaching, or maybe more time for them. I know a child. I know a girl who is in Form 4 right now, and she said it's actually the teacher that makes a huge difference. She was from a previous designated school, so the medium of instruction is English, and then into a mainstream school because the Chinese proficiency is really good. And she said it was this one Chinese teacher who motivated her throughout her secondary education, and the teacher actually. The teacher is very welcoming and also identifying her needs and very open and willing to volunteer her own personal time for the student. So she would tell her, whenever you need, just come in earlier in the morning, give me a shout, the night before, and I can meet you 7:30. And also we can chat at lunchtime. And she told me that the chatting is not limited to Chinese learning. Actually, during the chatting, she used Chinese because this is the more daily language that she uses, and she's not allowed to speak English because this is actually in itself a Chinese lesson, but it's not textbook learning. And the student feels that this helps a lot because this builds up her vocabulary and also her Chinese proficiency in the everyday life. and it's something that she can relate to. I feel, I know with teacher education, there is a class to cater for diverse needs, but I heard they talk about really many different needs of students, be it special education needs or ethnic minority, and I don't think it's enough. I think there should be another course for teachers to learn about cultural responsiveness. And cultural responsiveness does not mean learning about their cultures per se, like what they eat, what religious festival they follow. These are cultural backgrounds, but they really need to learn about needs of children from different cultures, and if it's a language lesson, then there's certain linguistic needs. And for I want to bring up math lesson because I find teachers in Hong Kong is very stubborn. Hong Kong Chinese teachers tend to teach math in the way they learned, and they're not very acceptable or open to other ways of doing, say, addition or multiplication, just arithmetic. They want children to learn their own way. But mind you, there are actually different ways to do multiplication. And I'm sure you know the steps, right? The steps of showing the multiplication actually count in a test. And if they don't follow the way that the teacher teach, then they don't get any marks, which I don't think is fair. Because coming from a different background, their parents may have a different way of teaching them more effectively. And because, especially in the Chinese medium schools, because language, they're not very familiar with the Cantonese language. They may not absorb as much as they can, but they still do the answers right. So I think this is some kind of, open-mindedness that teachers need, that as long as, they figure out a way, and they're learning, and it doesn't have to be, the strict way of doing that calculation. If possible, spend more time with the children, spend more time in a way, try and understand them, know their backgrounds. Because even though we're talking about as if they're one homogeneous group, like it's ethnic minority or non-ethnic Chinese students, but they're actually quite diverse too. Some may be born here and raised here, and some may be new immigrants. So they have really different backgrounds, and knowing them helps a lot, so that they can relate to everyday life. Because after all, you learn to be able to contribute to the society. We take Pakistani students, right? For some female Pakistanis, some of them wear hijabs, but some of them don't. And then teachers will think all of them, they must wear a hijab. And if they don't, then they're probably not religious, or they're probably, they don't follow their religion too devoutly. And I think this is a misconception, because not all female Pakistani would wear a hijab. And these are just some cultural things. But there must be something behind the families too. Maybe some families are more conservative, more traditional, and some families are not. And so
taking the time to explore that,
right,
to explore why there are those differences.
Yeah. I find for teaching, especially Chinese subjects, or using, actually not just Chinese subject, but using Chinese as a medium of instruction. When you use Chinese for ethnic minorities, it's already a big change from their daily life. I'm not saying English is better, because English is not their mother tongue either, but one needs to adapt to their needs and to what their ability is, and then try and adjust. I know there's not enough, or there's a lack of curriculum, especially on Chinese teaching. And I do hope the government would set some kind of curriculum so that teachers know what to teach. Because what I see is ethnic minority students from different schools, especially in Chinese, they all say, I have 3 students coming from primary 2 from 3 different schools. Their Chinese level can be very different. One can be like a mainstream primary 2. The other one may be a kindergarten, and one may be a primary 1. So the levels are really different, and then parents cannot follow. For example, I've seen parents whose child in primary 6 has very good marks in the Chinese in the Chinese subject. So the parents want her to go into a mainstream schools, taking up Chinese. But actually, the Chinese that she was learning in the primary school was very preliminary. So she didn't know until she got into the mainstream secondary school. So if the government at least set a framework and also some stage learning objectives, that by grade 2 or by primary 2, primary 3, whatever level it is, then a student should attain this kind of Chinese proficiency. Then teachers know where they should aim at, rather than right now most teachers don't know how far to teach and how much to teach, and I find this is a big difficulty that teachers are facing. I would advise them to know their students, or know his or her students. Yeah, it could be an introduction, an introductory class. They can use it either as in an English class or a Chinese language class, that you introduce each other, get some background, and spend some time at recess and lunchtime with the students. Be available to the students. Yeah. I hope teachers will have an open mind. I know many teachers in Hong Kong who grew up in the local system have not had experience with non-Chinese people, but they are part of us, and a lot of them are actually locally born and raised, and so we should embrace them as any other, any other student, and as Chinese students. And also the mission of teachers are going to help students learn. Yeah, so I think if you bear that in mind to help children learn, then it would be beneficial to help them succeed. Yes, yes.